changed the face of popular music.
He brought together poetry and popular music in a way that really hadn't existed prior to that. I mean, the folk scene was quite different. You know, that was a celebration of vernacular American music, whether it was you know, the songs of sharecroppers in the South, or you know, farmers in the Appalachians, or railroad men. Now there was a poetry in that, but it was a quite different kind of poetry to the literary tradition. And you know, by 1965, you've got Dylan singing about Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot fighting in the Captain's Tower in Desolation Row. I think that must have been hugely encouraging for someone like Leonard Cohen, who had this intellectual depth and literary sensibility that he might have imagined couldn't be satisfied in popular music. Suddenly Dylan proved that it could.
There is a famous story of Cohen taking a Dylan album to a party of Montreal poets, Ralph Gustafson and I think Klein, not Klein by that time, but Layton maybe, and playing it for them and them all being deeply, deeply unimpressed. And Cohen insisting, no, this is it, you got to listen to this, and playing it over and over again.
Though I know that evening's empire has returned into sand, vanished from my hand, left me blindly here to stand, but still not sleeping. My weariness amazes me, I am branded on my feet. I have no one to meet, and the ancient empty streets too dead for dreaming. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. I'm not sleepy and there is no place I'm going to.
Because of the example of Dylan, I don't think Dylan was a direct influence on Cohen in terms of the kinds of things that he wrote, but I think that the very fact that Dylan was there was an enormous enabler for Cohen. But the idea that someone could get up and sing in a popular mode and still be taken seriously as a poet, that was something which Dylan really made possible in a way that it simply had not been there before.
John is in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. The man in a trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend. The man in a coonskin cap and a pig pen wants $11 bills. You only got 10.
Dylan raised the possibility of doing serious literary work and also reaching a massive audience. Cohen certainly could recognize, you know, the quality of what Dylan was doing as a writer, and also, you know, as someone who had become a significant literary figure in Canada, could also see the much bigger stage that Dylan was able to play on as a musician, and I think that was attractive for him.
As much as Dylan had opened up possibilities for an artist like Cohen, his actual route into the new folk scene of the late 60s was hugely aided by another of its key figures, Judy Collins. Without her recognition of his songwriting talents, his transition from poet to musician may have been far less seamless.
Anathea, Anathea, don't go out into the forest. There among the green pines standing, you will find your brother hanging.
Judy Collins is a hugely important figure, I think for three reasons really, or in three different facets. First of all, she was an eminent figure in the folk revival. Recorded her first album in 1961. It's a record of mostly traditional folk songs sung in this very pure, almost soprano style voice. But secondly, she very swiftly recognized the new breed of singer-songwriters, or songwriters in particular, who were coming through. And she was one of the first people to record the songs of Dylan, of course, Phil Oakes and others. So she's significant in simply recognising. She wasn't a great songwriter herself, but she had an ability second to none to recognise a great song.
In the old wooden room where our hats were hung, our voices rang and our songs were sung, where we laughed for hours and were quite satisfied to laugh and joke about the wicked world outside.
And then thirdly, she was also significant in blurring the boundaries between folk music and pop music. So by 1965-66, for example, she's recording Beatles songs. And I think she was probably the first folk singer to do that.
And it was exactly at this time, when Collins was looking to record songs from outside of the folk canon, that Mary Martin, a Canadian music industry insider, suggested that the singer listen to the compositions of her friend, Leonard Cohen.
I think I met Mary probably in '63, and for 3 years she talked to me about Leonard Cohen and about his poetry and about his books. And she had gone to McGill, I think, with him in Canada. And he sounded very interesting. He was a published poet, and he was also a published novelist. He'd written, by then, I think he'd written Beautiful Losers. And so when she kept saying he thinks he might be writing some songs. So I said to Mary, well, why don't you, have him come down to New York and we'll meet and see if there are songs. Not expecting a lot. And Leonard came over to the house, and he walked in the door, and he was good looking, tall, dangerous looking, of course, handsome, quiet, a poetic type. We talked a lot that night. There were some other people there too, and we talked a lot, but no songs. So I thought, well, I guess he doesn't really write songs. And the next day he came back, and this time he brought his guitar. He sat down and he prefaced by saying, I don't know, I can't play very well and I can't sing very well, and I don't know if this is a song. And then he sang me 3 songs. He sang Dress Rehearsal Rag, he sang Suzanne, and he sang the Stranger Song. And the one that attracted me immediately was Dress Rehearsal Rag, primarily because I was working on an album which was a big shift from the singer-songwriter traditions. And I had moved into Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. I was recording songs from the Marat Sade, music by Richard Peasley, and I was recording Pirate Jenny. And this song, which really is about a contemplated suicide, seemed to me to fit into this dramatic framework very well. So immediately I said, my goodness, I could record that in 5 minutes. And then I thought about Suzanne, and I said the same thing.
Now if you can manage to get your trembling fingers to behave, why don't you try unwrapping a stainless steel razor blade? That's right, it's come to this. It's come to this. And wasn't it a long way down? And wasn't it a strange way down?
The songwriting itself has a kind of breadth and depth, which, after all, I was very exposed to good songs and good songwriters, but they fell within a certain kind of genre. And when I heard Leonard, I knew there was something that appealed to me as a songwriter and as an artist. It stretched me. The whole album was stretching me.
At this time, however, Cohen had no real notion of how he would be able to fit into the music scene, and the idea of performing his own compositions was something he was uncomfortable with.
He wanted to get his songs to other people, for sure. His experience with performing, I think, was exclusive to reading poetry at these little gatherings in Montreal and Toronto. In fact, I